Hello and welcome back to my writing vlog series. This is writing vlog number 15. I have read chapters 1 and up to chapter 19, and in this episode I'm going to read the last 3 chapters, which is chapters 20, 21 and 22. As I've mentioned earlier, this novel only has 22 chapters, and so it's not as long as some of my other works, but I think it's a full story anyway. I've got some notes about the story structure and what I plan on doing with the start of the novel later on in this writing vlog, but I think I will conclude on the story in general when I'm done writing, not writing, when I'm done reading the entire story. But I will read the first chapter now, which is chapter 20. I have read chapter 20 now, and quite a few things happened in this chapter. There's a big reveal. One of the other characters finds out about the main character, and it's something big that changes the rest of the story, and it pushes the story forward. Otherwise, the MC could just keep on living her life the way she has done so far, or at least the few latest chapters. She has been in this situation, but then something else happens, and she's forced to change her ways. But even though she's worried about her own future and what might happen to her, she still finds it easy enough to just go to her room and fall asleep. So she takes a nap even though her fate is up in the air. She doesn't know what will happen to her, if she can stay with this family and live there as she has done so far, or whether she's going to be kicked out or what. She doesn't know what will happen. She's conflicted about her feelings because on one hand she wants to stay in this family and live her life as she has done so far for the latest chapters, and on the other hand she's fine with retreating a bit so another character can enter the scene and live in that situation or live in that family with that family as the main character has done. She kind of feels like an imposter, and she didn't really feel like an imposter until one of the other characters found out this big thing about her, and then she doesn't really know what to do. And maybe I should make her more active, and instead of just making her go up to her room and take a nap, she should do something or say something to try and change the situation, even for the better or for the worse. Either try to make this family accept her as she is, or retreat. Instead of just, oh, I'm worried about what will happen, and then going and take a nap. It's a bit strange maybe, but I will see what will happen later on. In general, I think this chapter is quite alright regarding the prose. It is well written. There are a few things I need to change, and I still do a bit of head hopping. I also tell instead of show, and it's like I state that she's really tired. The chapter opens with her walking up the stairs, and she's hanging her head, but that might also be because she's sad or disappointed. But then I state that she's very tired, she's exhausted, and maybe I should add a few more words to describe how she's walking up the stairs, instead of stating that she's walking up the stairs with her head bowed. It could also be shame or something else, but if I add a few more descriptors, like dragging her feet and describing how her body feels like lead or something like that, it will get the point across more clearly than if I leave out the part where I state that she's tired, I can describe it a bit more, and then the reader will know, oh, okay, she's tired, instead of me stating she's exhausted. And so I have marked it with the color that indicates that I should show instead of tell. I do a bit of head hopping. I write the story from Katrina's point of view, but I still switch to other characters, saying something like, she looks this way, and or maybe Katrina states that she seems to be impressed or annoyed or something about this, and she cannot know how that person really feels. So instead of her observing, oh, I think she's this and I think she's that, I could just make the narrator describe how someone is talking or behaving, and then let that speak for itself, instead of having my main character reflect on, oh, I think this character is thinking this, or I think this person is feeling this way. Those are minor things, but it's something that I will keep an eye out for when I do the edits. But on to the next chapter. I have read chapter 21 now, and it's a nice chapter. It's a very fast-paced chapter, and I think the reader will know that something is going to happen, because there's a quick tempo, and it's the second to last chapter, and so the reader might expect something big to happen, which does happen in this chapter. And so the momentum keeps going, and then bam, the chapter ends quite abruptly. I won't go into detail with that because I won't spoil the story. I want it to be a surprise to the reader when or if I publish this and people are going to read the story from front to back. When I talk about it, I want it to be not that specific, because I don't want to reveal every little detail of the story, but I can just say that this chapter is fast-paced and something happens. There's a chapter break in the middle or toward the end of the chapter, but then it's still very fast-paced, and I'm not sure, but maybe I was in a bit of a rush when I wrote this chapter, and I just wanted to get it from point A to B and then to C, so this big thing could happen. And then there's the fallout of this in the next chapter, which is also the last chapter, and the next chapter is pretty long, so I might end up splitting that one. If I remember correctly, the climax and the resolution happened in chapter 22, and if I were to split the chapter, I think I could easily do that, and then have the climax in one chapter and then the resolution in the last chapter, instead of just mushing it all together and having one long chapter with that. And I also think that this chapter 21 could be a bit, I won't say that I will slow down the pace, but I think I could add a bit more to this, because it starts quite abruptly and it doesn't really follow up on what happened in the end of the previous chapter. It wasn't a cliffhanger per se, but it was something big that might change the main character's life entirely. And then when the next chapter starts, it's just, oh, it isn't really mentioned, and they are just the main character and her friend are just chilling and hanging out, and they talk about a football game that's coming up, and they're excited about this game, and they don't really, she's not really worried about her future anymore. And maybe that's a mistake, but I won't spoil that. I won't go into detail with what is going to happen and what happens in this chapter. Besides that, in the end of the previous chapter, I just I kind of just led up to something, and then there's really no payoff of that. The chapter starts quite abruptly, as I said before, and they talk and hang out, and then there's a bit of exposition in the beginning of the chapter where I kind of sum up what happened with that situation from before, and it's just brushed over, and oh, it wasn't a big deal anyway, and then she can just continue as she has done. And there's a significant time skip as well, because I stayed somewhere in the beginning of the chapter that several or a few months have passed, and they're getting ready for this football game, and she's the main character is excited for the game but worried because her friend is just very cool about it and says, oh, we can easily beat the other team and it's no problem and we will win. Easy peasy. But the main character finds that a bit odd, because why did they have to train so hard if it's easy? But that's a whole other discussion. I won't go into detail with that either, but yes, this chapter is pretty fast paced and we're getting closer to the climax. This is the prerequisite for the climax, and this is a climax isn't just one single thing that happens. I think it's a combination of several things, and things just go wrong, and there's a big fight as well. And the battle, the previous chapter has to have been the battle, but it wasn't really a battle after all. She's confronted with this, and then just, oh, I worry about it, but then it just goes away. Maybe that's a bit too easy, and I've made a note in my other document saying that I could easily add something in between that previous chapter with the lead up and the battle and then this chapter that leads up to the climax. I think I could add something, but maybe it's okay the way it is. I'm not entirely sure, but yes, I will read the last chapter and then get back to you. Oh my. Okay, so I have now read the entire manuscript, and the story has potential, and that's basically the conclusion I can make at this point, because before I started reading it, I thought that the story was basically done and that I just needed to read through and make sure that there aren't any inconsistencies and things like that. But I need to fix head hopping and show more instead of tell, and I also need to make bigger changes, unfortunately. There are several missed opportunities where I skip something that's actually relevant to dive into and show the reader, instead of just telling it via exposition and then summarize what happened earlier and not really go into that and just continue the story as if it's not really important to the story, but I think it is. So I actually think that I need to remove several chapters from the story and to add new ones instead, and I can flesh out the story a bit more. I want the reader to feel something when they read this story, and when I read it the first time on my own without filming anything or something like that, it had only been 3 months since I wrote the story, and I couldn't really read the story objectively and just make qualified notes and make a summary for myself for the edits, and I only focused on bigger things or smaller things when I read that, and just thought, oh, this story is fine the way it is and I don't need to change much. But I have evolved and become a better writer since then. At least I would like to think so, and I have learned more about do's and don'ts if you're a really good writer, or if you if you don't really care about writing rules. You can do whatever you want, but if you're just starting out, I think the safe choice is to follow the rules, and then once you're familiar with the writing rules and are confident that you can write a good story, then you can break the rules. Maybe I shouldn't worry about breaking the rules or following the rules that much at this point, but I think that if someone else had written this story and I read it, and I wouldn't be so protective of my own work, I would probably think that, why does the writer skip this? I want to know more about this, and why do we need several chapters about this? Those things aren't important, and I can go on and on. As I said before, the story has potential, but I sure need to change a lot of things, and I haven't really understood other writers when they state that they need to rewrite an entire story. I'm not at that point, fortunately. I don't find it necessary to rewrite everything. In most cases, it's just a question of whether you write something in a certain way or phrase it a bit differently. There's not really much point in rewriting an entire story if what you have is okay. It doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to make the reader feel something. And if you use a lot of fancy words and use purple prose, purple prose is when you use a very flowery prose, a way of describing something ordinary with fancy words and very descriptive, as if you're making a painting or something, instead of just making the point clear. I think writing should be clear, and the reader shouldn't go, what's happening here? I don't understand the meaning behind this sentence. It sounds very fancy, and I understand each word individually, but I don't get the meaning behind the sentence, and I think the writer is just trying to be fancy or something like that. I don't want that to be the case. I want to write a good story in a way that's accessible to most people. I don't want it to be cryptic in a way, and I don't want the prose to be flowery, this so-called purple prose, just to sound fancy. The story needs to speak for itself, and I hope it will do that. I hope it already does that, but it needs improvements, and it needs some changes. There are some head-hopping instances that I need to keep. I can't read out everything because in some cases it's important for the reader to know something from a different character's perspective instead of the main character's point of view all the time. So the narrator has to be a bit away from the main character instead of just having this close third. Or the close third is most of the time where we get her thoughts and feelings and we can read her mind, and in other cases we switch to something that another character does when the main character isn't looking. And I state she doesn't see this because her back is turned to this character, and so it's important for the reader to know something. And I think that's fine. If the story demands it, then that's what I need to do, and I want to keep the things that are necessary to keep, of course. And if I can find a way around some of them, I can change it and then maybe describe it in another way, as I have mentioned in an earlier writing blog. In some cases I tell or I switch POV to another character and state that they think or feel in a certain way, and the main character cannot know that. So I either have to stick with the removed narrator, third person narrator, who can switch between several characters. I don't know. Maybe I should just not worry so much about that and just look at each instance of this head hopping when I come to them. It's not necessarily a bad thing, as I've said before. So this chapter has the climax, and it has a bit of resolution, but it quickly fades out into, I won't say nothing, but the chapter ends and the story thereby ends, but it could lead up to a sequel or something. I tie a pretty bow on this story, and then this story is it and it's finished, but it could be a part of a bigger story if I continue it, but I don't think I will. As I've said in the video introduction to me and my channel, I talk about how I prefer to write standalone novels because I want to write one complete story, and the reader doesn't have to read several books to get the entire story. So that's just a preference. I have written a single trilogy though, but that has a certain appeal as well, and I like reading series myself. If another writer has a book series that's very expansive and requires several books to tell the entire story, then that's fine. I like media in terms of films and series. They have strengths and weaknesses. I think that series have a tendency to get a higher rating on imdb.com because you get to know the characters better over a series instead of just watching one movie. So each character can get more screen time if you have several books. So, but that was a side note. This chapter, the last chapter in this story is the climax primarily, I think, but it leads up to something, and then it's not a real climax because I don't know exactly how I feel about it, but and I don't quite know how to explain it, but I feel like something is missing from this climax. The climax doesn't need to be saving the world, or oh we did it in the nick of time and we barely escaped, or something like that. It doesn't have to be a life or death situation, and it doesn't have to be a very big climax to be a climax. But I think I should add a bit more to this, and then also have a proper resolution, or I'm not sure, but I think the ending is alright as it is. It's more the first, maybe 1/3 of the story, or maybe the first half. I'm not quite sure, but I need to go back and rework some of that. But that's a problem for later. At this point, I'm glad that I have read through the entire thing and made summaries for each chapter and notes for each chapter as well. And in the summary and notes document, I also have a section called general notes. This is some of the things that I have just told you about having to rework some of the first of the story and things like that. But yes, now I'm done with this writing vlog series. I will continue on with something else writing related later on, but I think at this point I plan on making the next 3 or maybe 4 writing related videos about gaming. I combine gaming and writing by taking the game and the sequel to that game that I'm playing at the moment, and then analyzing the story and the plot in terms of the story structure, and I will also analyze the characters and the world. I can take what I've learned as a writer and implement that when I analyze this game, Horizon Forbidden West. That will be interesting. So that will be 3 videos, or maybe the next 4 will be about that, but I will see if it ends up being 3 or 4. But when I'm done with that, I will get back to my own writing and talk about my projects. I'm not quite sure at this point what I'm going to work on next, if I will write something else or if I will continue on with this Project Katrina and then implement all of these changes. It will be a big project to take on, because there are many things I need to change about this, but I will see. I hope you enjoyed this writing vlog, and I hope you will watch the next videos. Like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. But yes, that was it. Until next time, take care. Thank you for watching.